tell the audience about how you got started in real estate. Today, I have my good friend Donovan on the podcast. Donovan has built nearly $10 million in Houston duplexes since 2020. And the big takeaway from today's episode is that both Donovan and myself have made dozens of mistakes. But if you structure the deals with an alignment of interests and be fully transparent with what you do and what you don't know, you can make some or a lot of mistakes and still find a lot of success. So enjoy.
Welcome to the Masters in Real Estate podcast with your host, Tanner Webster.
All right, we're live. So, Donovan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, Donovan was gracious enough to be our first guest, so thank you, Donovan. So, why don't you tell the audience about how you got started in real estate?
Yeah, again, I'm honored to be here. But yeah, so I got started in April of 2020. Basically a year out of college, I got into house hacking after getting into BRRRR, kind of like you and I both started that way. Once I got into that house hack, got it rented, everything was going good. I still wanted to be in real estate, and at the time, that kind of house hacking strategy was the only thing I knew. But as everyone knows, with those owner-occupied loans, you have to live in there for at least a year before you can really do it again, so to speak. And so I was looking for ways to stay in the real estate with using little of my own money, kind of like I did on that low down payment owner-occupied loan. And on BRRRR, what I was learning was that, BRRRRing a property or buying it, rehabbing it, renting it, refinancing it would be a way to recycle some cash without basically putting 20% down every time, which is what I was concerned with.
What was that first house like? What was it, a duplex like you're currently living in, or was it like a single family home?
Yeah, that first property in 2020 was a duplex, a new construction that I just bought off of the MLS.
Okay, cool. And then, so you found out about BRRRR, wanted to start doing more low and no money down. And where were you learning all this? Was it just on the internet, or did you have someone else, teaching you how to do it on the side?
Yeah, I wish I would have had a mentor. That probably would have been a lot smarter to do. But yeah, pretty much it was podcasts on the way to work, and then YouTube videos after work in the evenings, and then trying to piece it all together, which was not the smartest thing to do, but made it work.
Yeah, so you started with that house hack, then were you looking at single family stuff or multifamily? Like what, how did you end up at ground up duplexes?
Yeah, so off of the BRRRR podcast, I guess quite a few people. There's definitely some multifamily people on there, but the people that appealed to me at the time were the people with 40 rentals or 50 single family homes. So that's kind of what I was looking at, was to do some single family, either flips or fix and holds basically. And then the reason why the pivot to duplexes came about was when I was running the numbers on those fix and flip single family homes, the margins were pretty thin, just with the fact that I'd have to hire a GC. I still had my full-time job as an engineer out of college, so I couldn't really be there full-time to manage it, and also I didn't know how to. So I started to look at developing and what those numbers look like, and those looked a little bit better.
And how are you, even getting started with guessing what those, numbers look like? Were you going to RIA events or just talking to general contractors? Has anybody done this exact model before, or were you just kind of making it up as you go?
Yeah, I was definitely making it up as I was going. There's definitely people doing duplexes, like one or two at a time, but they were typically using their own capital and subbing it out themselves. So they were being the GC. So the way I was going about it was I would go on these Facebook groups. Again, I would try to attend meetups, basically anywhere where I could find a builder/general contractor. And I would say, hey, there's this duplex on the MLS, and I usually just showed them the one I lived in and said, I want to build something just like this, 2,300 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath each side, single story, slab on grade. Like, what would you charge me to build exactly this? And that's kind of where I was getting the numbers, the construction costs from.
Okay. And how did you figure out the design of these duplexes? Because I think development is really scary for a lot of people, kind of myself included, a lot of the time. So, how did you decide to build it this way versus the other?
Yeah, at first, pretty much the model was to design the one like I lived in. So the one I bought up the MLS had a brick front. For those that follow me on Twitter, it's the same one I have posted as my pinned tweet. It's a kind of light brownish side-by-side duplex. That's the first one I bought to live in. So that's kind of how the initial ones were modeled after, was to be exactly like that. Same finishes, same front elevations, same everything.
Okay, so you had the design. How did you go about just getting started? Were you, trying to partner with people? Or did you go try and get a loan? Like, how were you doing this?
Yeah, so once I had the construction cost, I knew, give or take how much it was going to cost to build it. I was getting the land prices from just off the MLS, like on Zillow, and in addition to talking to wholesalers. So to give everyone an example of the numbers, so like the first deals I was looking at back then in 2020, the land was right around like 35 to 40,000 for a 50 by 100, 5,000 square foot lot, which was the same size as my duplex that I lived in. The construction costs were going to be about I think back then you could get it at like 90 a foot, but for simple numbers sake, let's just assume that cost was 200. So basically I knew my all-in hard costs were going to be around 240. And I knew they would sell at like 300. So I knew I had like 60K of margin there. And so I started talking to hard money lenders. I was basically trying to figure out, I need to put as little down as possible, and what is that number? So I would shoot out my deal to quote unquote deal, because I could never execute it at the time, in terms I didn't have any money in the bank to do it. But I would send it to hard money lenders of like, hey, here's the numbers, like what's the loan you can give me? What are the points going to look like? What's the rate? And then based on the feedback from them, like they would send me a term sheet, cash to close would say, I don't know, 38 grand or whatever the number was. And then that's when I started trying to find partners for that cash to close number.
And so you went on Facebook and started soliciting securities for that?
Soliciting securities, yes. And hopefully no one from the SEC is listening. But yeah, at the time it was definitely hardcore soliciting, partner with me. I have this great deal. It wasn't scammy, like, because I at least try to show the numbers and like the comps. Maybe a little scammy in the sense of I had no experience, but at the time, I didn't know anything. I heard that you could partner with people through one of the Bigger Pockets podcasts, and I basically try to pitch it as that, more so of a partner rather than an investor.
And was your first investor actually from Facebook then?
Yep, very first investor. I went back and looked at what Facebook group. It was like apartment investors something. So it was basically people who were looking to LP, like that's where people would post their syndication deals, and then like potential LPs would be in there. In this case, I was able to find this first investor by, I was kind of like a leech now that I think about it. I would wait for someone else to post like their deal, and I'm like, no, I comment, say, oh, instead of doing that, you could invest with me with this and get this return. So for example, someone in, I don't know, Washington State, Seattle, I have this 200 unit multifamily, get a 17 IRR, and I would comment, or you can invest with me. I only need 50 grand and you can get a 40% IRR, basically, is what I was promoting at the time. Very
ruthless.
Yeah, no, very ruthless. I didn't know any better.
Did anybody get all mad at you for that, or was it just, it is what it is?
People didn't really get mad. I guess they would just kind of question the numbers on the deal. They're like, no way, like, what are you talking about? But again, like at the time, I was so used to getting rejected at this point because I was doing it so much. Like it started to not faze me. I just ignored them and only would reply to people who were like somewhat interesting. So people would be like, send me the presentation, and then that's when I would go full solicitation on them.
So it was a physician, right? A doctor out of New Jersey or something?
Yeah, so this doctor out of New Jersey, trying to remember what exactly. Yeah, basically the way it went was I commented saying you can invest in this 50K in Houston, and I think he had lived in Houston like in a prior life, like 10, 20 years, so he knew a little bit about Houston, liked it, and so he said DM me the presentation, DM them the presentation. Mind you, this is like gal number 47 that I DM the presentation to. So I'm just like, here it is, kind of fully expecting to get rejected. And then he's like, okay, let's set up a call. And I'm like, he's going to waste my time again just to reject me. The way it was going was everyone was like, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm not going to be the guinea pig to start it off. You have no experience, you have no money. So I remember taking the call in a Lowe's parking lot. I think I was getting something for my duplex. Again, this is how cheap I was at the time. Like I was trying to find, I think I was hanging up my own like bathroom towel racks and I had no idea how to do it. So I was in the Lowe's parking lot taking the call, just trying to get him off the phone. And he's like, oh no, like, yeah, I'm in. Like, what are the next steps? I'm like, oh crap, like what do we do now? And yeah, we just kind of went from there.
So what did you do from there? Did you like call anybody, ask them how they did it, or did you call an attorney? How did you structure that?
Yeah, so he was like, how are you going to set up the operating agreement? So I was like Googling lawyers. Again, I don't know anyone. No one I know is a lawyer. Again, also I moved to Houston straight out of school, so I didn't really have a connection down there in Houston. So I just Googled like lawyers, and upcounsel.com came up. For those who aren't familiar, it's kind of like a freelance. It's like Upwork or Fiverr, but strictly for legal work. And all the lawyers are based in the U.S. It's all legitimate. So I went on there and then paid a lawyer, I think it was $700 to set up the LLC and get the operating agreement. I don't even think I had $700 in my checking account, so I put it on my credit card. And I was like, it'll pay off one day, basically. And I think I told the investor, hey, we actually need to split this lawyer fee bill. I wasn't going to eat that whole $700 by myself. That was a lot for me at the time. So yeah, I went on there, paid him to create the LLC and then get the operating agreement, and then sent it to him, signed it, and then we're kind of off to the races from there.
And want to take a step back on that. So out of the 47 pitches, how'd you pitch that deal? Was it just, hey, I think I can get this to work and I don't have any money, but let's make it happen? Like how'd you do that?
Yeah, I try to really pitch it as like I was their boots on the ground partner. Someone who can watch over the property, someone who's going to be at the job site, because a lot of these people had invested in, again, like multifamily syndications or out of state rentals. So they were used to not seeing their investment, so to speak. So my pitch was, I'm going to take a little bit of the profit. I think with that first investor, the original agreement was 75-25. It's like, hey, I'm getting 25%, not much, but enough to maybe incentivize me to at least look over the project. Whereas you're not getting that with your, big multifamily syndication. You got to go through like investor relations to really get to the guy who's actually doing the work or whatever. So that was my whole pitch was, I don't have experience, no money, but because I don't have anything going for me, like I'll be at the job site all day if I need to. And I'm willing to give up all the profit is basically what I said. Like if it doesn't go well, like I won't get anything out of it.
And did he make you put up any money on that first deal?
No, he didn't. And the reason why was because I told him, I was like, I don't have any money. So like I think he wanted me to. Can't remember if it was him or somebody else. Basically, early on, it was like, put in $5,000 or a couple grand. And I was like, I don't think you're hearing what I'm saying to you. I do not have a couple grand to spare. I think I maybe had like $3,000 total. And so, but the problem was when I bought that first house hack, I still had 3 months left in my apartment. So I was paying both of the places at one time. So I needed that $3,000 to finish paying off that apartment. So yeah, I didn't have to put up any money. He sent the money. Another I guess, tidbit for the way I structured it was like, I had him send the money directly to the title company day of closing. So rather than him, wiring me the money directly, because some guy he's never met before, he just wired it directly to the title company for the land. And then I would send him the invoices for the plans and permits. And so he would pay those. And then, that was pretty much the total out-of-pocket cost because we got a construction loan for the construction.
Was it a credit union or was it? It's not Fund That Flip anymore. It's a new brand, but was it that company or how'd you finance that first one?
Yeah, the first 4 were all through a Bank of the Ozarks or Bank OZK. OZK is the ticker for it. So he actually, obviously him owning 75% of the entity and me having no money, no experience, no net worth, he had a PG that loan as well. And he didn't really have a problem with it for the most part. I think because the potential returns were high if he believed my pro forma, basically, which I think was pretty convincing if I do say so myself. And so, it was just through a regular bank loan. I think it was maybe 80 LTC at the time. This was early 2021.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. I think the rate was 4.5. And I was trying to fight him down to like 4.25. And I was just, good old days, like you said.
Yeah. So how'd that first deal go? How long did it take? What did it, I guess, compare and contrast the pro forma, your pitch deck versus the actual execution.
Yeah. So the timeline was completely blown out. I mean, I think I forecasted, because the way I was what I had in my pro forma was everything is going to go perfectly, right? So permits was only going to be about 3 months. I think I had heard at the time they were like 3 to 4. So of course I put 3 in the pro forma, as you naturally do. And then construction was anywhere from like 4 to 6 months. I put 4 months. So I'm estimating the whole thing to be about 7 months total. And I think there were multiple delays for a number of reasons. So I think the first big one was on the construction side, the GC had never built a duplex before. So, and I knew that going in, but he said he would just read the plans and it would be fine, which of course I believed him. I didn't know any better. And so, you're right, a duplex is basically 2 single families with a firewall in between, more or less. And so the issue that we had is that he didn't do the firewall correctly in between. And as you know, like once you frame stuff up, it's hard to just go, oh, we'll fix it. Unframe. Yeah, that's a very good word for it. It's hard to unframe something once it's framed. And so that delayed us like 3 to 4 months. On top of that, because we were going back and forth, not we, but like us and the city inspector, who's like, verifying construction with the permits and whatnot, all the inspections you got to get. The GC at the time had ended up cussing out city inspector. And so that was also not a good choice. And so multiple delays because of that. Because now the city inspector doesn't want to hear anything. He basically said, fix it. I don't care what you got to do, fix it. GC is trying to get out of it. So anyways, that's a couple of months there. I think, and then we had trouble getting bank financing because we were trying to build. So I skipped over a step, I guess. So with that first doctor who invested in the one, we ended up getting up to 8 lots before we even broke ground on any of them. So he had put up the money for all 8, closed on them, and then we started construction on the 4. And so we had a trouble getting the construction loan because neither of us had experience. He had rental properties, but he didn't have any construction experience. And then me, the little dumb old Donovan, is 23, no assets and no experience. So like, your PG is pretty much useless. So like, long story short, it probably ended up being like 13, 14 months. So basically double the timeline that I had originally projected.
And what was going through your head at the time, and how did you, explain that to your partner?
Yeah, so I try to be transparent as possible. So like when all this was going on, when I called him and said, he actually, or the GC built the property incorrectly or framed it incorrectly. Of course, the investor at the time is pretty unhappy, given that he trusted this 23-year-old kid, and it's kind of starting to backfire. So yeah, it was tough conversations in that, and definitely some sleepless nights on my part, but it was really, I just figured if I could get through the one or two, that I would hopefully have figured it out. So yeah, I basically just told him what was going on, and I said, here's what I'm going to try to do to fix it. Whether sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but yeah, I just try to figure it out as I go, to be honest.
And so how did you resolve all those issues? Like, what'd you end up doing with the firewall? All the other,
Yeah.
all the other projects you had under contract, how'd you fix those issues?
Yeah, the four, so this was the other mistake I made. So we started obviously all four at the same time. And so as you can imagine, the same mistake was on like 3 of the 4 before we caught it. So all 3 of them got hemmed up because of that issue. Basically what we had to do was like cut up some drywall and like slide it in between the frame. Like it was very, very labor intensive, took a while. Again, the inspector ultimately ended up passing it because we met the requirement of basically you needed, a total of 4 sheets of 5/8 inch thick fire or drywall, type X, which is what gives you the quote unquote firewall. So yeah, we basically had to figure it out. I wish we would have done that sooner. What the issue was the GC kept going back and forth of like trying to just get it by as is instead of actually just doing what was on the plans. So we eventually got it worked out, and yeah, it just took 4 months longer than I would have hoped for.
And I'm assuming you don't use that GC anymore?
Yeah, so I actually ended up firing him midway through, kind of around that standpoint. It was maybe, I think right after we got it fixed, I was like, okay, it's taking too long. What I did was essentially take one of his subcontractors who was kind of on site every day, really directing everything, kind of promoted him to GC and cut out the middleman, because the way it was working was the GC I had the contract with, they would, have so-and-so go out there and actually do everything. So basically like a site supervisor, more or less. He was the one actually out there while the GC I had a contract with would be off on his own jobs doing his, maybe higher end new builds that were more profitable. So my deal was just to cut out the middleman and to promote the guy that was actually there every day. So yeah, that's the guy I've been using in the last 20 or so.
Okay. So going back, that first project takes a long time. How was the budget? Did the budget end up?
Yeah, budget ended up being fine. Like I said, it took like 4 or 5 months extra, but I made them pay for any issues regarding fixing that firewall. So the only thing I really had to pay for was the increased holding costs. Obviously it's taking 4 months longer, so I had a little bit more holding costs. But remember at the time the rates were 4.5, and so we were, 40% through the budget, and rates were 4.5. So we're talking minimal expense. The other thing that definitely helped me out is anyone who was in real estate from 20 to 22, 23, really, the longer you took on a project could actually be beneficial because the prices were going up month over month consistently. So what I thought we would exit at 300 ended up exiting at 360. So ended up working out.
Little arbitrage.
Yeah,
there.
I just call it blind luck, but I'll take it.
So first one sells, you nail it. Is everything good with the investor and he's stoked? And
oh yeah.
How are the other 4 going? What, you picking up other stuff? What's good?
Yeah, so while we're doing construction on those, I'm still finding deals that I think make sense, especially with the increase in sales prices on the back end, because I'm seeing it in real time. So I'm still buying more lots with other investors as this is kind of going on. That first investor was obviously pretty happy with the first 4 because we just exited at a higher value. So I think we refied, we cash out refied like 3 or 4 of those initial ones. And so he was able to pull out, all his money, and then some, which was, happy for him, or he was good for him. And so he was he was in good graces by the time it finished, but I think during it he probably had some heartburn, at least a little bit. So
It is vaguely familiar, that exact same deal process. Contractor not doing what they say, investor starting to get upset, end up figuring it out. I think a lot can be learned from that. Is, if you have a good business plan and execute 80% of it, maybe, then you'll be all right if the market continues to go up tomorrow.
Exactly, definitely doesn't hurt.
Okay, so you did those first ones with your partner, the physician, and then how are you getting more money? Are you structuring the deals any different? What are you doing?
Yeah, so the future deals, so while those are under construction, I think we had got up to maybe like 15, 16 lots with about 3 or 4 other investors. Basically, each future investor pretty much took around 2 each. So 2 lots at the time was basically $50,000. So they were putting like $100,000 for 2 lots with plans and permits. Yeah, sorry, I think I missed your question. How does it go from there?
So how does it go there? So, you finished that first one, everything's happy. And then, how do you get to where we are?
Yeah, so keep going. Pretty much the same model. I think the structures were more or less the same. So like I said, that first one was 75-25. I think all these successive ones were 70-30. Up until last year. So I pretty much had finished about 20 duplexes until I started changing the structure to 70-30 with like a 6% development fee, 6% of the hard cost development fee. And then recently, like this week, we have 2 that I'm closing on next week, actually, that it's a 80-20 in my favor, but like a 15 pref for the investor. So I kind of worked for free for more or less a good 2 years. Free is not the exact word, but I worked for minimum wage considering how much time and effort and sleepless night I put in for before I really changed the structure.
And how did you find these new investors?
Yeah, so still was finding those, like the next 3 to 4 initial ones were all from Facebook. Like my 5th or 6th one was someone I worked with, was really actually my mentor at my job. So like in my engineering role, I'd work with them pretty closely, like learning how to do the engineering stuff. And then when they kind of asked what I was doing outside of work and I let them know, they were interested in getting involved. So I found one through that way. And then I'd say investors like 7 through 11 came from Twitter. That was about the time when I was posting on Twitter pretty much through that entire period. But that's when, after the first reconvene, was like end of 2021. And I finished my first project like early 2022. So that's when I started to get a couple more investors from Twitter.
Okay. And how were those conversations with them? Because, the first ones didn't really go to plan. What were you changing on subsequent deals? How were you managing them?
Yeah, I think it's getting ahead of the stuff that you really just can't Google or figure out, kind of like what we were talking about offline of like with the water meters. Like, how would you know when to order the water meters? How would you, for example, in Houston, you have to get your driveway and sidewalk permit before you can even request for electrical meters. So there's all these little things that, just little nuggets that you wouldn't know until you went through it. And so I started keeping a list in my phone of like mistakes I did on builds 1 through 4, basically. This, and this. Then go to the site, check on the firewall. Like, I had all that in the list. And so and don't get me wrong, I still made a ton of mistakes on the successive ones, but they were at least different mistakes. So I just try to not make the same mistake on the future ones.
It's like that Trammell Crow memo that I sent you today. Lessons we learned from mistakes we made. Instead of a memo, it's just
exactly.
Notes app. Okay. So you're doing all these deals, and then you're also doing some stuff in Minnesota.
Yeah. So last year, my high school friend Michael and I responded to a RFP, a request for a proposal, from the city of St. Paul. St. Paul, Minnesota is where I grew up. And so basically what what they have is they had some lots, some city-owned lots they were looking to develop into housing. Now, the issue with the Midwest and, Minnesota in particular, but especially the Midwest, is it's difficult to make a lot of those small single-family, multifamily pencil, and pencil meaning, for example, this build will cost us $600,000, but we're planning to sell it for $400,000. So if you want to make money, that's not the best business plan to sell it for a 30% loss each time. And so the way that program was, they give you the lot for free, and they also provide $200K per unit of subsidy. So on a duplex, we're providing $400K of subsidy. Then we're getting the remaining amount of construction funds from just a regular bank, a lender.
And so what's the business plan on that? You're getting all these subsidies. Are you planning on renting them out? Are there any affordability restrictions on that?
Yeah, great point. So essentially, anytime you get even $1 of subsidy, there's going to be some income restriction requirements or some sort of restriction, really, so that you can't just come in and just profit off the city's money. It's essentially what they're trying to avoid. If you want to make some money, they got to get something out of it. So the way it works for this RFP that we responded to is that we have to sell it to a person or family who's 80% or less of the median income. And so the way they calculate that, won't get into it too in depth, but basically they want 30% of the person's gross income to go towards housing. And so if the median, go ahead.
So if someone's making, $100,000, they only want them to spend $30,000 on their, on the rent.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically. And so that's going to be the qualifications for this duplex we're going to build and sell. And the way that we as developers make money on it is you get to build a developer fee into your budget. And so obviously if you sold it for market rate, there's no money to make, right? Because you're building for 600, selling for 400. So the way it works is in that 600K, or actually on top of that 600K, there's a developer fee somewhere between like 6 to 10% of the hard cost that you can earn for going through that process.
And is that something that you plan to continue to do in St. Paul? And
yeah, I would like to do it, especially with rates being at 8.5 really for the prime rate at least. And so it's going to be tough to make a lot of the just in general development pencil. And so the nice thing about the affordable side is it's not really relevant to the interest rates, right? Because your profit or the money you're making is built into the construction budget. And so the rates affected a little bit in this case because we're selling it to a buyer who's going to be affected by the rates, but especially with there's a very big housing bill that was passed this year, and so there's going to be a lot more subsidy money for affordable housing. So I think there's a good opportunity for affordable housing developers to get in there and kind of get some affordable units on the ground.
Very cool. So you're in Houston still. You're doing all these deals. What's the long-term plan for you? Do you plan on starting a fund?
I know. I feel like you're pushing me that way at this point. Like I think I need to. No, I don't have a grand plan. I wish I did. It's basically continue to do wet pencils for now. But I definitely want to get into. My goal is to develop. I'd say my long-term goal is to develop in multiple places, though. I do want to do that. So like developing in Houston and Minnesota. A guy DM'd me recently who's in like Oklahoma, where some stuff might pencil there. So I would like to maybe attack that missing middle, that 2 to 20 unit kind of across the country, as we're seeing tons of upzoning. Austin, St. Paul just had one last week. Houston had a upzoned 8 units that starts next month. So we're starting to see that across the country, and there's not too many developers that I've found that are really attacking that space.
And if anybody wants to invest with you, who might be a listener of the podcast, how do they go on doing that?
Of course. I was going to say, first you do have to be accredited. Unlike my very first deals, he was accredited, but that was not a criteria. It was, do you have money? Come partner. Reach out to me on Twitter for sure at Donovan Builds, and then I have a email sign up list that I'll send out deals to. That's in my bio, so check that out, or just you can shoot me an email. Sweet, yeah, let's do that.
Cool. Well, Donovan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for being the first guest. We'll have to bring you back.
Yeah, I'm excited for all these future guests you have. So thanks for having me on.
Okay. Thanks, man.